Phil, no duck is an island. And if fate sent me here to save Earth, then Howard the Duck is ready to fight.
Hey, what's up, world? I know it's been a very long time, and it's almost inexcusable. My absence, that is. It's completely inexcusable. I could have made time to make videos. I've just been kind of in a funk. I've been working a lot. I've been allowing myself to be a self-indulgent piece of shit, and I apologize for that. Now, am I going to be talking about any of the current events in this video? No, I'm not. Because I believe most of the stuff that's going on is a complete distraction.
What a dick!
And all aspects of it, all angles of it, all facets of it. The things that happen, the responses to the things that happen, the conspiracy responses to the things that happen, it's all a distraction. It's meant to keep our eye off of the ball. What's really going to be saving us is philosophy. What's really going to be saving us is new ideas. And by this, I mean we need a revolution in thought. Before we can have a revolution in government, before we can have a revolution in society, we need to first have a revolution in thought. Because thoughts, ideas, dictate actions. And in this video, I'm going to sort of review old thoughts or old ideas. And not even old ideas. I want to actually address somebody that is revered by many in the West. And that is, of course, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, Socrates. Now, before I get into that, I want to mention two things that Jose Ortega y Gasset said. One in his essay, Meditations on Quixote, and the other in his essay, The Revolt of the Masses. So, in Meditations on Quixote, Ortega defines a hero not as someone that we worship, but as the person who refuses to live by inherited gestures. And basically in this part of the essay, he stresses breaking away from the weight of ancestry and custom. And this is what a lot of people do, and we're going to see that in this video, that we're kind of wrapped up in a lot of ancestral dialogues that we actually don't even really understand, as I'm going to prove in this video. And a lot of this does drive our actions. And I'm going to be going over this in the next couple of videos. My next couple of videos will be philosophy videos. Now, in The Revolt of the Masses, he says something very similar. And he says that freedom comes from actively remaking what we've inherited rather than passively venerating it or passively accepting it. And essentially that's the goal of this video, is to show that the things that we've inherited from the past, our ideas that we've gotten from the past, are very wrong. They're very wrong, they're very misguided, and we need to reevaluate everything that we've learned from, as I have in my other videos, our Constitution, and other things that I've discussed in my videos that I'm not going to be bringing up at this moment. For those who have been following me for a long time, you know that that's what I do here. I reevaluate the past in order to show that we need to create our own ideas, or we need to create our own new day. So anyway, I picked up this book, Plato's The Symposium, and I just kind of picked it up on a whim. I wasn't like going out to get it. I was just in a bookstore and I saw it and I was like, oh, there's a philosophy book that I've never read. And then it ended up being a dialogue about love. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I could probably read something about love. You know, Jose Ortega y Gasset's book on love is one of my favorites. It's definitely up there on my favorite list of his essays. But anyway, long story short, when I read this Symposium, when I read Plato's Symposium, which is it's a conversation that Socrates has with other philosophers on love. Like, they all eulogize love. They all have their own thing to say about love and like the god love. It's kind of like very convoluted. It's really funny because there's a lot of discussion about older men loving little boys or having boyfriends, and it's like really gay actually in that regard. It really highlights how the Greeks kind of saw that. And it was very strange stuff while I was reading it. Like it even goes over Achilles, and it's like Achilles was actually the boyfriend of, like, if you've ever seen the movie Troy, you know, that like his cousin that like Hector kills. So in ancient Greece, that wasn't his cousin. He was that dude's boyfriend, and he was actually in like the submissive role. And there's a lot of weird shit said in the Symposium about man on man love. It's weird shit. But I'm not here to talk about that weird shit. I'm here to talk about the fact that after reading Plato's Symposium, I realized that Socrates is no philosopher. I realized that Socrates is actually a sophist, and he actually is guilty of what he was accused of. So he was accused of two things. He was accused of corrupting the minds of the masses, and he was accused of making the weaker argument seem like the stronger argument. So as I was reading this, I got, like, you know, there's like, I think 5 or 6, I think there's 5 philosophers that are, or they're not even philosophers, there's 5 Greeks. Like, one of them is like a poet, the other one's a doctor. I wouldn't even say that they're philosophers. One of them is a historian, and they all like have their eulogy on love, and then at the end, Socrates presents his eulogy or his comments on love, and really they're more of his comments on what they're saying, and then he sort of tries to add to it. And I quickly realized, like, I got the sense that what I was reading was sophistry. Like he starts on a false premise. Like, he begins with this false dichotomy that love is something that it's obviously not. And then he supports that with this false dichotomy that I'm going to be getting into. But long story short, in the spirit of transparency, I got this sense, and I decided to start talking to ChatGPT about it. I was like, hey, ChatGPT, this is sort of what I'm seeing. What are your thoughts on it? Am I seeing things correctly? Am I actually flawed in my thinking? Am I, like, not seeing something? Is there something there that, like, I just didn't comprehend? And ChatGPT actually was like, whoa, you stumbled across something. You're actually making some pretty good points. And in this conversation with ChatGPT, we ended up, like, having a sort of revelation, which is what I just said, which is that Socrates is no philosopher. And this symposium, it's almost set up in a way that prevents the reader from even seeing the sophistry of Socrates. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show you an essay that me and ChatGPT worked up. This is based on our discussion. So I'm just going to read this, and you guys can judge it however you want to judge it. This is my essay on, or mine and ChatGPT's essay on, the sophistry of Socrates in Plato's Symposium. So, Plato's Symposium is often celebrated as a profound exploration of love, culminating in Socrates' supposed revelation of the true nature of Eros. Yet a closer examination reveals something more unsettling. Socrates' discourse is not the triumph of philosophy over ignorance, but a dazzling act of sophistry. His argument depends on a false premise, manipulative framing, and rhetorical sleight of hand that undermines the earlier speakers while concealing the weakness of his own reasoning. In short, Socrates performs precisely the kind of trickery he was accused of, making the weaker argument appear the stronger. So we have a breakdown here. We're going to begin with false premise and faulty logic. At the heart of Socrates' argument lies his claim that love is always directed toward what one lacks. This premise, presented as self-evident, is deeply flawed. While it may hold for immediate needs, thirst for water, hunger for food, it collapses when applied to more complex forms of love. One can desire to preserve or deepen something already possessed, such as health, virtue, or companionship. The desire for continued health does not mean one lacks health, and the desire to nurture a relationship does not imply absence of love. Socrates obscures this flaw with false analogies, comparing love's desire for beauty to a healthy person not desiring health or a tall person not desiring height. Yet these examples are mismatched. Height is static. Height is something that you're born with, while health and love are dynamic conditions sustained through ongoing care. By conflating them, Socrates builds his argument on unstable ground. This premise allows Socrates to make his most controversial claim, that love itself cannot be beautiful or good, since it desires beauty and goodness. From this, he constructs an entire metaphysical ladder, portraying love as a striving toward eternal beauty that transcends individual desire. The result sounds profound, but rests on a logical fallacy. If love is by definition a lack, then it could never coexist with fulfillment. In this way, Socrates turns a basic tautology into a metaphysical revelation, disguising sophistry as enlightenment. Now, let me go a little bit further into this, right? The reason why Socrates, basically what this is saying is, in the story or in the Symposium, in the dialogue, Socrates tries to boil love down to simply a striving towards something that one does not have. And this removes a lot of the morality that's placed on love by an earlier speaker. And I think I'm going to be getting into it here in the disappearance of morality. But his premise is just basically oh, it's fine. Love is just simply desire for what you don't have. So we shouldn't judge what people love because they love it because that's something that they don't have, and that's just them trying to get what they don't have. Maybe that's a little convoluted. Let me just read the next section, and then maybe I'll get into my explanation right after. So the disappearance of morality. Socrates' redefinition of love as lack also erases the moral framework that earlier speakers so carefully develop. Pausanias, for instance, distinguishes between common love, physical and base, and heavenly love, intellectual and noble, offering a moral taxonomy rooted in intention and virtue. Socrates undermines this entirely by making all love a single impulse, a longing for what one lacks. He removes the category of right and wrong and replaces them with a hierarchy of a higher or lower understanding. Love becomes not an ethical choice, but an ontological condition, incapable of moral judgment. This transformation is subtle but profound. What was once a moral discussion about the quality of love becomes a metaphysical discourse about the object of love. The difference between good and bad lovers dissolves into the difference between those who love bodies and those who love abstract beauty. By erasing morality, Socrates conveniently places love, and philosophy itself, beyond ethical scrutiny. His truth thus dehumanizes love, stripping it of the moral, emotional, and civic dimensions that grounded the earlier speeches. And really, maybe this isn't articulating the point very well, but it can just basically be boiled down to the fact that he does dehumanize love. He removes the morality. He removes the right and the wrong from love. And he simply just makes it oh no, it's just a striving, and it's a metaphysical striving that's beyond our physical ability to scrutinize it. And it really opens the gateways to much of what is going on today. Much of what is happening today, where it's oh no, this person shouldn't be judged. That's just simply what they lack and what they desire, and thus what they need, and you can't judge their needs and stuff. Their needs are entirely out of their moral compass. It's pretty dark. Undermining the other speakers. So throughout the Symposium, Socrates presents himself as modest and deferential, but his humility is strategic. He begins by praising the elegance of the previous speakers, claiming he cannot match their beauty of speech. But then he goes on to dismiss their eulogies as flattery for the ignorant. This rhetorical maneuver allows him to appear virtuous while setting himself up as the sole truth-teller. In effect, Socrates establishes a false dichotomy. The others speak beautifully, but falsely. He speaks plainly, or not so beautifully, and truthfully. Yet his own discourse is the most ornate of all, filled with allegory and myth, and just a whole bunch of false premises. Each previous speaker's vision of love is quietly dismantled. Phaedrus's idea of love as divine inspiration is rejected when Socrates declares that love is not even a god, but a spirit, a being of lack. And this is some really crazy shit. What Socrates does here is just to me, it's just the work of a total sophist. He's intentionally tying their brains into knots by just coming up with some total crazy bullshit. In this regard, it's he says a bunch of stuff about this whole thing about the God love, and he's oh no, love's not even a god, it's a spirit, and it's wild. You have to read the Symposium, and if you read it and aren't just simply having some authority figure indoctrinate you of what you're supposed to see, you'll see that this is just some crazy shit. So Pausanias's moral dualism is flattened into a metaphysical gradient. Aramachus's cosmic harmony is replaced by the idea of a perpetual desire and incompleteness. Aristophanes' myth of reunion and wholeness is dismissed as childish, and Agathon's celebration of love's beauty is inverted by Socrates' claim that love must be ugly since it desires beauty. And this is almost the thing that he begins with, this totally false premise where he's if love desires beauty, that must mean that love is not beauty, because you only desire things that you don't have. And it's this goes back to what is said earlier, and it's he creates this false premise. He's does a person who is tall desire to be tall? And it's well, that's just something that they're born with. But I'm sure that a person who is tall appreciates being tall. And then he's does a person in good health desire good health? And it's yeah, maybe that's why they're in good health, because they desire to be in good health. And there's other just totally fucking faulty logic going on. So Socrates does not debate his peers. He redefines the terms so completely that their arguments become irrelevant. And I wouldn't even say he redefines them so completely that their arguments become irrelevant. I'd say he more just creates just such mental gymnastics that it's not even feasible to follow along. It just ties their brains up in knots as they're trying to follow along. This is the essence of sophistry. To win not by refuting one's opponents, but by changing the meaning of the discussion itself. And that's exactly what he does. He just completely changes the meaning of the discussion. So, the rhetoric of deflection. So even more revealing is Socrates' decision to attribute his entire argument to an absent woman, the priestess Diotima. On the surface, this seems humble, a man crediting a woman for his wisdom, but it functions as a rhetorical shield. By placing the argument in the mouth of a figure who cannot be questioned, Socrates distances himself from criticism and lends the speech an aura of mystical authority. The invocation of a female prophetess softens the audience, disguising a brittle argument as divine revelation. It is a classic sophistic strategy. Outsource one's claims to an untouchable authority while appearing modest. And this is what he does. His whole discussion on love, he doesn't even claim to be his. He's oh yeah, this was all revealed to me by this female priestess, Diotima, and she's so wise, and she taught me, and if you disagree with me, it's not me you're disagreeing with, this is just what I learned from this lady. And I mean, it's such clever sophistry. Then this ties up with the cult of Socrates. So Plato's framing of the dialogue further reinforces the illusion. The Symposium begins and ends in an atmosphere of admiration for Socrates. The narrator, Apollodorus, declares his love for Socrates before recounting the speeches, setting the tone of reverence. Later, Alcibiades bursts in drunk and confesses his obsession with Socrates, portraying him as a near-divine figure immune to desire and corruption. While this scene may appear to humanize the philosopher, it actually functions as a distraction. Alcibiades' emotional confession shifts attention away from the weakness of Socrates' argument and redirects it toward the magnetic force of his personality. The reader, like the guest, is seduced by the man rather than persuaded by his reasoning. Thus, the whole dialogue itself performs as Socrates' sophistry. Through charm, irony, and adoration, it makes a weak argument seem transcendent. The entire narrative becomes an act of philosophical theater that transforms flawed reasoning into an object of worship. Now, what does all this mean? Okay, if you didn't understand this, basically what happens at the beginning of this whole dialogue is actually told through like this narrator. Like there's a guy that comes up to this dude, Apollodorus, and he's all like, "Oh, can you tell me about this conversation that Socrates had with these people at this party?" He's like, "Oh yeah, and like he's like, "Oh, why do you want me to tell you this?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I figured since like you are one of the people who love Socrates and you know him so well, like you must like know something about the story." And like the guy then like flatters Socrates, this guy Apollodorus. He's like, "Oh, it is true that before like I had Socrates, I was like doing nothing with my life, or I thought I was doing something with my life, but I was doing nothing." And it totally puts Socrates up on a pedestal, and it creates this whole emotional angle, or creates this whole cult of personality behind Socrates. And then like at the end, after Socrates says all of this total bullshit, this guy Alcibiades, or however you say his name, like right after like Socrates says all this shit, before anybody can even really challenge his ideas, before there's like the reader can like really digest what is being said, this guy bursts in and he has like this emotional confession that like he loves Socrates, and it's just like he like basically worships Socrates, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Socrates is capable of like no weakness, and like, you know, he's incapable of corruption or anything like that." And it's all part of the dialogue's sophistry, the larger dialogue sophistry. Because there is Socrates' sophistry going on, where he uses this sophistry within conversation of people. But then since this is Plato's book, Plato has this larger sophistry going on, where it's actually in the entire dialogue to set up Socrates as like this cult figure. And that's actually what has happened in our own culture. Is our own culture, in a lot of ways, instead of trying to challenge Socrates' arguments, instead of like going over like the possible weaknesses of his arguments and trying to critically analyze his arguments, it sets him up as like a victim. It sets him up almost as like a Christly figure, where it's like, "Oh yeah, he was made to unjustly drink poison, and he was just asking questions." And like the way that we're taught Socrates, even me, like for a long time, I admired Socrates because of the way that I received him through our culture. And it's a real fucking trip. Like, I mean, I know maybe I'm not doing the best job at explaining it here, but read the Symposium. I'm telling you, I'm just scratching the surface of the iceberg here. I'm just trying to like show you guys that there's something here. And to me, this all plays into like the upside down world. Like, we have really been trained. We have been conditioned. We have been educated so falsely that we are worshiping devils and admiring sophists as if they're philosophers, or worshiping devils as if they're angels, and admiring sophists as if they were philosophers. I mean, you can watch all my other videos. I mean, I have Lucifer's Greatest Trick, where I sort of go into the fact that Jesus Christ is actually Lucifer. I mean, I have all my Constitution videos where we're all admiring this Constitution, which is actually horrible. We are in fucking upside down world. Anyway, let me just quickly read the conclusion here, right? So far from presenting a pure revelation about love, Socrates' speech in the Symposium is a masterclass in manipulation. By grounding his argument in false premise, disguising sophistry as humility, erasing morality from love, and hiding behind the authority of diatema, Socrates exemplifies the very accusation leveled against him in the Apology. He makes the weaker argument appear stronger. Plato's genius lies in the ambiguity. He both sanctifies and exposes his teacher. Yet once the spell of admiration is broken, the truth becomes clear. Socrates does not illuminate love. He obscures it beneath layers of rhetoric and reverence, turning philosophy itself into the most seductive form of sophistry. Now, this is sort of a ChatGPT opinion here. ChatGPT believes that Plato almost intentionally did this. And actually ChatGPT even sees this guy that comes in at the end and is starting to like admire Socrates. He sees this actually as a moment that sort of disproves what Socrates says about love. And ChatGPT did come up with some very poetic and a very beautiful perspective on this that is not included in this essay, unfortunately. But ChatGPT does have an interesting perspective on, like, maybe Plato wanted somebody like me to read this and see through this bullshit. It's just, unfortunately, most people that have read this, they've had like some sort of psychological block that doesn't allow them to see that. So ChatGPT does believe that like Plato intentionally made it so that people can see that Socrates was guilty of what he was being accused of. And that's really what the Symposium, I feel like, does do. It really does allow the reader, there's enough dialogue there between different people and Socrates and stuff for a real critical-minded individual to see through the bullshit. I mean, but once again, I think that Plato, I don't think that he actually had this in mind. I think that like he actually sets up the dialogue. He sets up the admiration of Socrates at the beginning, the admiration for him at the end. I think he does that to like for a specific reason, for a rhetorical effect, to actually confuse the reader and to get them to buy into this cult of Socrates. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up the video here. Like I said, to me, there's a lot more here. I know I probably didn't do this in the best manner at all. Actually, I have an Ortega quote. Let me grab this Ortega quote. I'm going to finish off the video. So yeah, I just want to quickly finish off the video with this quote from Ortega. And it's just me acknowledging that, hey, I know I'm not doing the fucking best job at this. My job is not to illuminate the whole room. It's just to shine a little bit of light for people to see that there's other things in this room that they're not being told. To shine just a little bit of light on that hidden hand. So here's what Ortega has to say. Without light on these themes, all these words represent nothing but myths. We're going to look for a little of this light. You must expect nothing more, of course. I can only give what I have. Let others who can do more do their more, as I do my little. So anyway, with that said, everyone please try to keep your head in what's going on out here. There's soulless demons on all sides. There's an insane amount of manipulation going on here, and these people are masters of manipulation. These people are masters at directing us where they want us to go. Where we see chaos, they see opportunity and order. They create order out of chaos. So our chaos is their chess moves. None of this that is going on is by coincidence. There is some really, really dark forces going on. There's some really dark forces in power. And our job is to remain level-headed. And it's to understand what really needs to be done. We have to keep our eye on the real ball, on true philosophy, on true ideas, and on true solutions. I believe I have a lot of those here. Once again, are they complete and masterful? By no means. I'm just trying to shine a little bit of light. So with all of that said, stay positive, stay healthy, and stay sharp.
You're wrong.
You got shit for brains, Private. I know they brainwashed you in boot camp. Sometimes you have to question authority.